Yeah, we talked about other features or capabilities, but rather than open it up to the group. And
Yeah.
questions about the platform, or how much is this really customizable? Would this work for my group? What are the different modes you could deploy this or use this infrastructure? And I'm thinking those things might be of interest to you, and I'd rather hear your questions.
So a question for Daniel. What kind of staff time are you looking at? How much your staff is actually being put into these things when staff need to be?
Well, so far I've been the one that's done the work for my organization. I wouldn't say that it's been that much. I mean, the actual using Project Tracker, I mean, much more work getting the project up to the point where we're ready to enter it in.
Okay.
But I would say, if you have all the data in front of you ready to go, to enter one project in, you probably spend maybe half an hour putting it in. And that's just making sure, you do everything right and like that. Yeah, but that's typically what my experience has been.
It's pretty user-friendly. Folks have been able to figure it out. I've provided a lot of the tech support, and I lean on Sitka to help me on occasion when I get questions I can't answer. And they've been fantastic about supporting that process. But there are tools that are sort of embedded in here. We can have videos, for example, training videos in the system, so we can show folks how to use the various applications. We haven't really leaned on that, and I think if I was to do it over again, I probably would have done a webinar at the beginning, introducing this to everybody and showing them the steps, rather than I sort of did it dispersed at various meetings and meeting with individuals and that sort of thing. But there are ways that you can collectively do that, and you can actually have the video online too, so they can see the training materials.
Bravo. This is like the cat's meow, baby. I love it. This is actually the kind of thing I've been dreaming about for years, because I love databases. I think they're just phenomenal. And in the context of a longer life cycle, I can see a number of different models for its financial support. So I'd be really interested in a year or so to learn more about how that happens after you do get your FIP funding, because I'm sure you will. And I would also love to know about the various models by which other watershed councils and other restoration groups across the state could take advantage of it. Either it's obviously a replicable model, but under what platform? Is it something that is handed off to another group to do with it what they will, or is it made available online for other groups to subscribe, or whatever the case may be? I think it would be really interesting to learn about all of those concepts as they're developed over time.
Sure, I can speak a little bit of that. So it's a software as a service. We host and manage it, and that allows us to update the software. And when Daniel or John decide they need a new feature, we'll have a conversation with the other users to see if it's something that they want, and we will implement it in a way that everyone gets it. So the nice model about this is that it's a community of folks using the platform, so investments made down in California flow automatically up to here. So I'm really excited about building that community. It's it's good for my business, of course, but it grows the community and allows us as technologists to not be solving the same problem over and over again and making the 12th project tracking system, but having one really solid one where the community is funding it and getting the benefits from it. So there's an annual hosting management fee that covers a certain amount of tech support and bug fixes and improvements that everyone pays into, and we actually give 25% of that back to TRPA, kind of as a thanks for investing in this for so much, and they either cash that or they turn around and ask us to add stuff to their other platforms that they're working with. So it works out great. It's depending on the needs of the organization. It can be done locally, like the Clackamas Partnership. Pretty tight geography and a tight set of goals and objectives and limiting factors, or it can be done statewide. So the California program that we did is the entire state of California, and there's a set of 18 RCDs, Resource Conservation Districts, basically soil water conservation districts down there, that banded together early on, kind of from the ground up. And like there was 5 or 6 of them that were pretty active and said, we need better tracking. We need to tell our funders a better story about what we're doing with their money. And so they contacted us and said, can we stand this up? And now they're in conversations around, does the Association of California Resource Conservation Districts want to take it over and help manage it and carry it forward? They do have a goal to take it across the state this year and next, I think. They've got about 100 projects in there now.
And Matt, if I could just
Yeah.
intuit some of the questions. So if some other group was interested in, signing up for this,
Yeah.
how much work is it, and probably also how much cost is it involved in getting going? Because I can see, like if another group of watershed councils or SWCDs, the application would be very similar. I mean, especially if it had to do with fish. But at some point, you're going to have to create your table of limiting factors that you're going to use and performance measures and focal species and those kind of things. So how much of a task is it for a new group to get onto this?
So I'll use an example, and then I'll maybe do a little instruction. So for the California group, we work with 2 executive directors, Edie from Mendocino and one from Gold Ridge RCD. And we worked with them for 2 or 3 weeks to help them think through what is the project structure, what's the taxonomy you want to use, what are the classifications of projects you need to have in order to meet your reporting requirements, kind of work from the end backwards, what kind of reports and analysis do you want to do? And then what are your performance measures? Sometimes you already have those, and sometimes they don't. If you don't have that stuff figured out, it's going to take longer. And we can help consult through some of that, but if there's a lot of work to be done on program definition and high-level objectives, we'll say, time out, either work on that internally or get some help to do that, and then we can build a system. It doesn't make sense to build a system when you don't have that stuff figured out. And we have some partners that we work with that are really good at that and very efficient and can help with that. With the California folks, they're like, we got it figured out. We've been doing this forever. We know, we got our performance measures. We know our classifications. And so they said, we'll take a pass on bringing in some help on that. And I'd say halfway through, and now you ask those folks, should you have done a little of that? And they're like, yeah, that would have been a little bit easier. So they did come up with their list of 35 performance measures. They've got a pretty elaborate taxonomy. It's working pretty darn well for them. So they kind of decided to go scrappy and actually get something in the system and start entering data and using it and then adjusting from there. So our part of the work with them was 6 to 8 weeks from start to finish. So they had nothing, and then they had a system that had 30 projects in it and the capacity to add n number of projects within 6 weeks. And the total expense for that was $75K. And some of that, $10K of that went to the annual maintenance, and then the other part was some amount of data importing and consulting that we did to help them create the system, and then they wanted some specific features and functions that weren't in the system. And so we worked to add that, and then Clackamas Partnership got that stuff for free.
Yeah.
And then it flows both ways. So it can be as little, we're talking with some folks in Colorado for as little as like $20K to get up and running. Kind of depends on where you're at and how much work you're willing to do. The system is very configurable. So it started out as a system very specific to TRPA. What we did when we stood up the open source project was we abstracted all of that program customer specific stuff and we made it all very configurable. So if I logged in, I have a manage menu. I'll do that really quick just to give you a quick sense of that. I was trying to do that earlier. Couldn't remember my password. Look at that. So this manage menu allows me to actually define what are my ecological concerns, sub-concerns, and limiting factors. That's the taxonomy that John set up for the Clackamas Partnership. Those labels can be configured by you. Right? You might not you may not think of your program that way. So the California RCDs have the concept of just 2 levels. They have a resource area and a program, and then they hang their projects off of those. Then they can define different classifications, focal species. For them, they're called project themes. They've got climate change and soil conservation, and it's not just about species. And the performance measure list is entirely configurable. and then so on and so forth. You can have a certain amount of flexibility in the homepage and whether or not you have featured projects and all of that. So there's a lot that you can do yourself as kind of a power user administrator.
Yeah.
And this, only the very few items at the bottom are things that only we do to set up the system to begin with.
Yeah. Well, the cost is actually less than I was thinking, so that's
Yeah,
good.
and the way the CRCDs did it, they said we got a coalition of the willing, 18 RCDs to begin with, and some of them chipped in as small as $1,000. Others chipped in $5,000, and that's how they came to their 75K and said, get going. They did that, we get them in the system, and then within 3 months, one of the foundations in the Bay Area got exposed to the system, saw it, and they're like, we want more of this, can you do? And so they came up with some additional specific funding to add an accomplishments dashboard that kind of rolls everything up at a high level. So we're excited about the idea of the founders and foundations getting excited about this new level of transparency. And that's a double-edged sword. I realize you guys don't want to welcome the funders too deep into your operations and details, so you'll want to think through that. But there is certainly more and more demand on transparency and this kind of stuff.
I have a question for you too as well. I know you were talking about seeking funding for on. I guess I have a more question about like what your sustainable revenue plan is for this to ensure that there is time for the maintenance of it and then for your staff time to be able to do it, for indefinitely. And then also what kind of collaboration strategies you're using within all of your groups to make sure that you are using exactly the same metrics and have the same system and language throughout when you're entering the program.
Okay, good question. So let's start with the funding. And we've had these conversations. Right. So right now we are in the process of applying for a FIP implementation grant, and we are building funding into that grant for the duration of the FIP process for some maintenance and actually some staff time for some of the partners to be administrators and do the work. So our initial plan is, assuming we get the FIP funding, that's going to pay for it. If we don't, things get a little more complicated. And I think at this point, we've got so much to do to get ready for our grant application. I think we're kind of punting on that. But we have talked about that. It's like, okay, if we don't get this grant, what's going to happen? And part of our multi-organizational strategy is that this software actually helps us, in a way, a different kind of strategic funding tool. Because obviously, like with any grants, you need matching funds. So we're going to use, the fact sheets and the fact that this is all part of this big platform when we go to, whether it's the Myron Warren Trust or whoever else. This software then can help us leverage funding from other sources, not just OWEB. And that could include funding for maintaining our piece of the project track.
So then are you assuming if you get the grant, to be able to carve out a staff person's time and say like 20%, half of their time will be used to administrate this?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this, and there are a couple of watershed councils within our group that would really like to get some funding to help fill out their coordinator's time and are interested in doing that work. So we're putting that in as line items into the FIP grant.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to what Daniel said is there's just so much buy-in amongst all the partners that this thing is valuable. They're all committed to making it work and funding it over time, regardless of what kind of funding scenario we have with OWEB. That's just one component of our funding strategy. We're looking at other funding sources, and we have internal funding sources. SWCD, thank you Tom, provides us with funding for things. We have Metro providing funding for things. So we have internally within the partnership funding opportunities there too. But what Daniel said is this is a great platform to show off to foundations and others that we have our act together, and that will help generate funding, whether it's for this or for projects or whatever. And I'm heartened by the example with the RCDs down in California getting funding from a foundation to help support this. I think that's really key. The other thing I want to say is it's really been cool to be part of this organic, growing community of users of this platform where we all benefit from it. And Sitka's done a great job of facilitating an ongoing conversation amongst all of the users of this platform in terms of how we use it, what kinds of upgrades we're looking for. We're finding some common themes of things that we all want to see in the system. So it's this organic, evolving platform, and the more users we have, the more we're all going to benefit, and that's really cool.
I know it seems to be really driven by seeking funding and reporting back to funders.
Yeah.
I was interested in if, in my context, it'd be great to have this kind of a tool, but I'm not sure I could get all the people involved that would need to report into it to actually report into it to make that aggregation helpful. Can you speak to any experiences? What's that secret sauce? What should we be looking out for before embarking on something like that? Or does it need to be just an organic collaboration that then decides they need a consistent set of information?
It'd be interesting to hear how that's being done in Lake Tahoe, because I would imagine, they're not after one big funding source. I mean, do they make this like, if you want to be part of this, you have to enter your data? I mean, is it a carrot or a stick?
It's all carrot. I mean, they were doing the spreadsheet data calls, and going crazy, and really underreporting a lot of stuff. So the tool itself has some workflows built in, and it will notify and say, hey Joe, it's that time of year again, time to update your project. And you click on this link, and there's a wizard that steps you through, and it's really 5 to 10 minutes max that someone can go through and update their project. The biggest carrot that we discovered along the way, that we did not fully anticipate, was that fact sheet. And it was, hey, I'm actually giving something back that is of value, that is going to save me and my staff time. I'm no longer pulling these things together between 9 and 11 p.m. at night for my meeting the next day. I'm no longer doing tons of work in Excel to compile my accomplishments and pulling data from paper Word document reports. And so it's been shocking. They've gone through 4 years of updates, and the EIP down in Tahoe is a lot more backwards looking. What did you accomplish? These guys, as well as the California RCDs, are doing a lot of proposals and planning and looking more forward. But for the updates, they set up a timeline where they expect updates between November and January 15th, and the system has a series of progressively encouraging email reminders, nags, to get people to do it, and they get 400 or 500 updates submitted during that period of time. And it's fairly well dialed. The right people get emails saying this project just got updated, please take a look at it, approve the update. And until that update's approved, the official public version of that project is not updated. And then there's a lot of kind of built-in help to make that easy. But I think it's the one thing that I think that there's still opportunity to do to help more carrots, to help your folks, encourage them, is if they believe in the larger performance measures, the larger objectives. One thing that we could and should do a better job of is after someone submits their update and says, I did, my own half of this and so many acres of that, to immediately take them to the summary pages for those accomplishments for their watershed and say, here's what the chart was before, and thank you for completing your project or providing this information. Here's what the chart looks like now. And give people that immediate feedback that we're not just asking for data because it's fun, but because it's actually helping the entire watershed, the entire community, tell a more accurate story about what's happening, and you can see what your part is in that bigger picture.
And that's where we've had no issues getting partners involved in entering their data in this, because they see the value added to the system. The fact sheets are really key. Everyone has to track accomplishments anyway, and this is a straightforward way to do it. In the past, for the Clackamas population, Jim Brick at ODFW would ask each of these organizations to report to him the accomplishments, because he would aggregate it for the Lower Columbia Recovery Plan. Now his job is easy, because he can just go right in the system, push a button, and get the aggregation for all the accomplishments there. And it's much easier for the partners to do this rather than spreadsheets and all of that. So that's been a pretty easy sell. I will also add, on the organizational level, we are working through, as part of this planning process, developing an MOU with all of the partners in terms of what their expectations will be as we move into implementation. And one of the clear expectations will be that if you take on a restoration project, you will report the findings or the performance metrics, the outputs in Clackamas Project Tracker. No controversy around that. Folks understand that that's going to be one of the obligations for signing on.
Yeah, although, Andrew, your question, I think it's a good question because we're not at a place where we have all these new projects that have been completed. This is just, we're doing this to get funding, right? And so if this is really going to be used long-term to be able to track what you're asking about, Andrew, I think that's really an unanswered question. And it was interesting, I had a related question I was asking Matt and Damon not too long ago, having to do with, well, is there some way you can get data out of this software and like move it into another piece of software? Because I was thinking, you know, OWRI, OWeb, has this database that goes back, you know, decades, and, you know, is somebody going to have to take data out of this and print fact sheets and then, you know, re-enter everything again? You know, so is there, and this is obviously way in the future, but it would be really cool if there was some way to, like, you know, create a comma separated value file or something like that of all this information, and then have OWeb be able to just move it right into their database. And I know, that's kind of a dream. I mean, how many pieces of software do you know that talk together like that?
You can export and get all the data out in one click.
Yeah, with those spreadsheets.
Into a spreadsheet, a multi-tab spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And then there, for the Tahoe group, we have created a set of web services that allows people to programmatically get the data out as delimited text or as actual data objects that another program can use. And we've done some work with a group down in California that is actually tapping into those web services and pulling those projects in to a larger statewide picture of conservation. And we've had some initial conversations with, the other question we get is, hey, we have an existing tracking database project list, can we get that in? And we've identified a way to point this tool at those projects and have them automatically import what it can when the field and stuff will work. So there's a few different things we're doing to help with that data flowing around.
Okay. So it's like almost at the hour, but we did have some product sheets and more information about Project Firma by the door, on the table by the door on your way out. But if maybe there's one more question, we could probably answer that.
I was just going to add that I would guess that this tool and platform can be used to inform and certain organizational goals and priorities also. So to the extent that I think collaborators would contribute to this and see that value toward their larger organizational goals
Yeah,
and priorities
exactly.
also, I think that's another carrot that makes it more goals.
Oh, you're right.
Just one quick, can you customize the fact sheet at all?
A little bit. The language on it, all the text on it, and the colors for the bands, the different areas of programs, and then all the content. But the layout itself, no.
Okay, yeah.
We have two different flavors, one that's geared towards a project that's completed, that's kind of brag sheet, and the other one's the funding sheet, which is like the beg sheet, which is, here's what I want to do, here's my funding that I've got lined up, here's the funding
Yeah.
need. So we've done some customization over time, but there's not tremendous flexibility there,
Okay.
just because it's,
Yeah, I only ask because I can see it being used for different audiences. Foundations are different than government agencies, which are different than individuals for a year-end appeal, but that
and we
could be
did that.
good.
The folks at Tahoe were heading off to DC, they're like, we need some special different things here. So we did a small little one-off, like in an afternoon, created one that wasn't public, but if you knew the URL, you could look at the fact sheet for that project that way. So that kind of stuff is easy with a few hours of work.
So, since you're kind of cutting off questions, can we talk to you
Yeah,
after?
absolutely, come on up.
Yeah, come on up. Anything.